John takes his $50,000 life savings and uses it as a down payment on a $500,000 house. His twin brother, David, takes the exact same $50,000 and drops it into an S&P 500 index fund while continuing to rent an apartment. John thinks David is an absolute idiot who's throwing his money away paying a landlord's mortgage. David thinks John is a fool who just chained himself to a highly expensive 30-year debt prison. They both think they made the much smarter choice to build wealth. But they're both missing a massive blind spot because John completely forgot to calculate the hidden, unrecoverable taxes of home ownership, and David entirely underestimated the psychological torture of the stock market. And when you actually sit down and run the brutal, unfiltered math on both of these strategies over a 10-year period, the gap between their net worths will make your stomach drop. My name's Matt, and today we are going to settle the single biggest debate in personal finance: real estate versus stocks. We are going to take that $50,000, split it down the middle, and run the exact numbers over a decade. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which path is going to make you more money and, more importantly, which path actually fits your psychological tolerance for stress. In America, we have a cultural obsession with real estate. We view a house not just as shelter, but as a moral victory. We view it as the ultimate symbol that you have made it as an adult. And because of that deep psychological attachment, we completely ignore the math. Here's the thing. If you ask the average person on the street what the best investment in history is, they will say real estate. They will tell you about their uncle who bought a house in California in 1995 for $150,000, and now it's worth $1.2 million. See, 8 times his money. Real estate never loses. But human beings are incredibly bad at calculating long-term annualized returns. We are also incredibly good at ignoring holding costs. According to data from the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, historically, over the last 100 years, U.S. real estate has appreciated at an average rate of about 4 to 5% per year. Meanwhile, over that same 100-year period, the S&P 500, which is essentially a basket of the 500 largest, most successful companies in America, has returned an average of roughly 10% per year, assuming you reinvest your dividends. So, if we just look at those two numbers on a whiteboard, the debate is over, right? The stock market doubles the return of real estate. Game over. Go buy Vanguard index funds and close this video. Wait, not so fast, because we haven't talked about the superpower of real estate. We haven't talked about the financial steroid that makes a 4% return mathematically explode. We have to talk about leverage. This is where it gets really interesting. When you buy stocks, you're generally using cash. If you want to buy $50,000 worth of the S&P 500, you have to physically transfer $50,000 from your checking account to your brokerage. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. But real estate operates in an entirely different financial universe. Real estate allows you to use OPM, other people's money. If you have $50,000 in cash, you do not buy a $50,000 house. You walk into a bank, you hand them your $50,000 as a 10% down payment, and the bank hands you the keys to a $500,000 asset. I need you to really hear that. You put in $50,000, but you now control $500,000 worth of real estate. The bank gave you $450,000 of their money to play with. So let's run the math on what happens when both of these assets appreciate. Let's assume our conservative historical averages. The stock market grows at 10% per year, real estate grows at 4% per year. Let's keep this fair. Both John and David start with the exact same $50,000. Scenario A. The stock market. You take your $50,000 cash, you put it in an S&P 500 index fund. You do absolutely nothing for 1 year. 10% growth on $50,000 is $5,000. At the end of year 1, David has made a $5,000 profit. Scenario B. Real estate. You take that same $50,000 cash. You use it as a 10% down payment to buy a $500,000 house. You do absolutely nothing for 1 year. Remember, real estate only grows at 4%, but it doesn't grow 4% on your $50,000. It grows 4% on the total value of the asset. 4% growth on $500,000 is $20,000. At the end of year one, John's house appreciated by $20,000. Because he used leverage, his actual cash-on-cash return wasn't 4%. He made $20,000 off a $50,000 initial investment. That is a 40% return on your money in 1 year. This is exactly why your high school buddy on Instagram is telling you to buy real estate. Leverage is the ultimate wealth accelerator. When prices are going up, leverage makes you look like a financial genius. But leverage is a double-edged sword, and this is the part of the math that the real estate industry conveniently forgets to mention when they are trying to sell you a house. Real estate is incredibly heavy. Stocks are incredibly light. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, what does it cost you to hold it for a year? Basically nothing. Maybe an expense ratio of 0.03%. It just sits quietly in a digital vault, multiplying. It never complains, it never needs a new roof. When you buy a $500,000 house, the expenses attack you from every single angle. Let's go back to John's $500,000 house. We established that in year one, the house went up in value by 4%, giving him $20,000 in equity growth. But did John actually make $20,000? Absolutely not. Let's subtract the holding costs for that year. First, because he only put 10% down, he has a $450,000 mortgage. Assuming a 6.5% interest rate, John is going to pay the bank roughly $29,000 in pure interest in year one. That money is gone forever. Next, he has property taxes. Let's call it a conservative 1.2%. That is $6,000 a year gone to the government. Next, homeowners insurance. Thanks to massive inflation in the insurance market, let's call it $3,000 a year. Next, because he put less than 20% down, the bank hits him with private mortgage insurance, PMI. Let's call it $1,800 a year. Finally, the most insidious tax of all, maintenance. Houses break, the AC unit dies, the plumbing leaks. A standard rule of thumb is 1% of the home's value per year in maintenance. That's another $5,000 a year to Home Depot and contractors. Let's add that up. John's house grew by $20,000 in equity, but he paid $44,800 in unrecoverable holding costs just to keep the house. John's net financial position on that house in year one is negative $24,800. Now, you might be screaming at the screen right now, but Matt, you have to live somewhere. If John wasn't paying that $44,800 to the bank in taxes, he would be paying it in rent. Rent is throwing money away. Okay, let's address the greatest financial lie ever told. Is renting throwing money away? Yes, absolutely. You hand your landlord $2,500 a month and you never see it again. But guess what? Paying $29,000 a year in mortgage interest to a bank is also throwing money away. Paying $6,000 in property taxes is also throwing money away. Paying $5,000 to replace a water heater is also throwing money away. When you own a home, especially in the first 10 years of a mortgage, you are throwing away massive amounts of capital. You are just throwing it to the bank instead of a landlord. And this leads us to the true calculation, the math concept that separates the wealthy from the middle class: opportunity cost. Let's return to our twins, John and David. They both make $120,000 a year. John took his $50,000 and bought the $500,000 house. His total monthly output, mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and PMI, is roughly $4,100 a month. David said, "No thanks, I don't want the stress." David took his $50,000 and invested all of it into an S&P 500 index fund. Instead of buying, David rents a very nice apartment for $2,500 a month. Because David's rent is $2,500 and John's housing cost is $4,100, David has a massive cash flow surplus of $1,600 every single month. David takes that $1,600 and automatically invests it into the S&P 500 every single month alongside his original $50,000. Let's fast forward exactly 10 years. What happens? Let's look at John first. His $500,000 house appreciated at a historical 4% per year. After 10 years, his house is now worth roughly $740,000. He has been paying down his mortgage for a decade. His remaining loan balance is about $390,000. If John sells his house, he takes the $740,000 value, subtracts the $390,000 loan, and subtracts 6% in realtor fees for selling. John walks away with roughly $305,000 in pure liquid equity. John feels like a genius. He turned his original $50,000 into $305,000. But what about David? David never fixed a toilet. He never paid property taxes. He just rented, chilled, and let his money sit in the stock market, earning a historical 10%. David's original $50,000 compounded for 10 years, plus his $1,600 monthly savings, the difference between renting and buying, compounded for 10 years. After a decade, David's stock portfolio is worth $450,000. David beat John by nearly $150,000. And this is the most crucial part. David's wealth is entirely liquid. He doesn't have to hire a real estate agent, stage a house, or wait 60 days to access his money. If David decides he wants to move to Italy tomorrow, he clicks a button on his phone, sells his stocks, breaks his lease, and gets on an airplane. John is trapped. If John loses his job, he still owes the bank $4,100 next month. If the local economy tanks and housing prices drop 10%, John's leverage suddenly works against him and his equity gets wiped out. The math is brutal, and the math is clear. In almost every historically average scenario, aggressively renting below your means and investing the difference in the stock market will generate more liquid wealth than buying a single-family home. Now you might be thinking, okay, Matt, if the math favors stocks so heavily, why are so many people wealthy from real estate? Because we are humans, not spreadsheets. And this is where psychology violently collides with mathematics. If David actually takes his $1,600 surplus every month and invests it flawlessly for 10 years, he wins. But here is the uncomfortable truth. David is a human being. In year 3, David gets a promotion. He has $100,000 sitting in his brokerage account. He looks at his beat-up Honda Civic. He looks at his $1,600 monthly surplus. David's brain says, you know what? I'm doing great. I'm going to finance a new BMW. It's only $800 a month. I'll just reduce my investments to $800 a month instead. In year 5, David decides he deserves an expensive trip to Bali. He sells $15,000 of his stock portfolio to fund it. In year 7, the stock market crashes 20%. David panics. He logs into his Vanguard account and sells everything at the bottom because he's terrified of losing his money. This is why real estate creates so many millionaires. Real estate is a forced savings account. When John buys his house, he doesn't have a choice. The bank forces him to pay that $4,100 every single month. If he wants to take a vacation to Bali, he can't sell 10% of his living room to pay for it. The asset is entirely illiquid. He is trapped, which forces him to hold the asset through market crashes and recessions. Real estate protects you from your own stupidity. It protects you from your own lack of discipline. Stocks require absolute, unyielding emotional control. You have a liquid button on your phone that allows you to liquidate your entire net worth in 5 seconds. If you lack discipline, the stock market will chew you up and spit you out. So, which one should you choose? Real estate or stocks? The answer depends entirely on your psychological makeup and your current phase of life. Let me give you the exact framework to make this decision. Option 1, the stock market path, the minimalist. You should choose the stock market if you value flexibility above everything else. If you are in your 20s or 30s and you want the ability to job hop, relocate to a new city, or start a business without a massive monthly liability dragging you down, rent unapologetically. Keep your housing costs brutally low. Take the difference, automate it into an S&P 500 index fund, and delete the app. Do not look at it. Let it compound. You will build massive liquid wealth without ever plunging a toilet. Option 2. The real estate path. You should choose real estate if you have a family. You know you are going to live in the exact same city for the next 10 to 15 years, and you crave stability. But listen to me very closely. If you choose real estate, you must obey the math. Do not stretch to buy a house that consumes 45% of your income. Do not buy a house just because your friends are buying houses. If you buy a house that makes you house poor, you are not building wealth. You are just volunteering for financial slavery. Look, guys, both of these asset classes have created millions of wealthy people, and both of them have bankrupted people who didn't understand the math. The biggest lie in the financial world is that there is only one right way to get rich. If you want to buy a house because you want a backyard for your dog and you want to paint the walls whatever color you want and you plan to live there for 15 years, buy the house. Enjoy your life. Just understand that you are buying a lifestyle asset, not necessarily the most optimized financial vehicle. If you want to rent a cheap apartment, ignore the social pressure of your peers, and dump all your cash into Vanguard until you have $500,000, do it. Let them judge you while you quietly build absolute financial freedom. Wealth is not defined by what asset class you hold. Wealth is defined by your discipline, your consistency, and your ability to ignore the noise and stick to your own mathematical plan. If this video hit home for you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up so the algorithm pushes this message out to other people who are desperately trying to figure out what to do with their savings. And listen, if you decide to take the stock market path, if you want to build massive liquid wealth and ultimately buy your freedom, you have to understand exactly how the math of the first $100,000 works. You need to watch this video right here on the screen. My name is Matt. Thanks for watching.